All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, March 16th, 2018. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everyone. It is a chilly 22 degrees with a real feel of 7 and snowing here lightly again in upstate New York. So where do we leave off on Wednesday? We titled the show Nano Eye Drops, Lipid Nanoparticles, Food, Nutraceuticals, GNA, and DNA. And I think that was show number 5 or 6 in this series on nanotechnology and nano in our food and nano in healthcare and investment in nanotechnology to commercialize it beginning back in 2005 per a funding bill that George Bush signed in 2003. And I was going to move on this morning, except that I had 2 or 3 presentations here still on nanotechnology being used in food packaging and in agriculture that I had promised the last show we were going to get to, and of course we never did. That's how it happens so often. But I thought maybe that would be a good rotten cherry on the top of this nanotechnology cake that we've been looking at. And it'll make a nice series. I just looked, if anybody is interested and you missed some of the shows of the series over the last couple weeks, you can always go to ucy.tv/BTFC Before the First Cup and scroll down to the bottom. And at the very bottom, there is a playlist for the show embedded that has all the titles, and you can see anything that was a repeat says encore. There were a couple interesting repeats over the last few weeks between these shows that didn't have to do with nanotechnology, but we also found the 2 older shows that I had done on nanotechnology and played those in the series as well. So, I don't know, it's a good background, and it gives you a lot of information, tons of links that'll make your hair stand up on the back of your neck if you wanted to read them all. But like I said, we're going to finish up today and see if we can move on to some designer proteins. So we had looked at a lot of crazy things. One was this new nanoparticle to correct your vision without surgery. They've been testing it in animals. They say they haven't tested it in humans yet, but it's coming. But it could potentially take your vision back to 2020 without the need for zapping your eyeball with laser. So from there, we also took a look at these new ways of getting nanoparticles into our body. These are these lipid encapsulated nanoparticles. They could do them as a liquid or as a solid lipid nanoparticle. And a lot of the food manufacturers are developing these technologies on their own with just guidance from the FDA, no real laws, no real rules, no real inspections, just as long as it's the same sort of ingredient. But remember, once you take a standard element or chemical from the macro world and you make it into a nanoscale, it reacts differently to the environment, whether that be an external environment or an internal environment. So there is some scientific concern about these technologies getting into our food supply because there really aren't any long-term studies. And one of the ways that they were concerned about was potentially leaching through your packaging. And we're going to take a look at some of that today because I ran across something about bottles too that I wanted to point out. So, all right, I ran across a PDF. I'm not really sure where this is from. It doesn't have a publication name. The Journal of National Cancer Institute, volume 96, number 21, dated November 3rd, 2004. And I think if that is one of the most concerning things that we have seen over the last few weeks looking at these technologies, is that this is going way, way back. They've been experimenting for a very long time, at least a decade and a half, with nanotech back when they also were tinkering around with genetic modification. Remember, this all kind of stems out of our original biological warfare research that was being done at some of the places like Fort Detrick, Maryland, and some of the stuff with entomological warfare using insects and animals at Plum Island. I don't really want to get into those connections today, but we did a lot of those connections way back when. We ran across a story out of the New York Times that I know I'm probably never going to be able to find it now, but it was back from like 1999 with one of the generals from Fort Detrick, Maryland, talking about some of the research that they have been doing and how they had done some of the original genetic modification when they were doing mad science, gone mad in long dark hallways that nobody really knew about. So the connection is there. It's all federally funded research. And remember, they've been doing research on animals for a very long time, but now to be able to accelerate these quote-unquote cures, as per the 21st Century Cures Act, we have to speed these innovations forward to help cure diseases, whether they be cancer or, genetic diseases, or maybe even mental diseases. If Johnny hit his head when he was 12, when he was playing football, we might have to fix him. All right, so this is out of 2004. The Journal of the National Cancer Institute. It is titled Nanotechnology Grows into a billion with a B dollar enterprise. And that was the plan. Small is big, and although nanotechnology has been in the academic and media buzzword for several years, federal government and private investors are now backing a host of initiatives with huge sums of money. In fiscal year 2005, and that is when Bush inked that commercialization of nanotechnology, federal agencies are slated to spend more than $1 billion on nanotech, defined as science and engineering at the scale of a 1/1,000,000th of a meter, or about the width of 10 water molecules. Private concerns are expected to ante up another $5 billion to $6 billion in the United States just alone. Because remember, mad science gone mad is good business here in the United States. And nanotech observers say that the stream of money is flowing from the unique nexus that forms nanoscience, where physics, chemistry, engineering, biology, computer science, and medicine mesh in unexpected ways. Unless, of course, you've been listening to the show, then you would understand how unexpected, wink, those ways are. At conferences, microchip experts mingle with oncologists who talk shops with material engineers and toxicologists. In every corner of science, it seems, is going nano. Hey! Get excited. That's why it's in everything right now, and this invasion is about to commence. Interdisciplinary is so overused, but this is one of those fields where it truly applies, says Cherry Murray, PhD, Senior Vice President for Physical Science Research at Lucent Technologies, and where? Oh, Bell Labs. What? Who's the organizer of the recent nanotechnology meeting hosted by the National Academies. So there you have it, Camille. Bell Labs, tied to nanotechnology in our bodies. Yes, we are just learning to talk to each other, she says. Developing a common language is the goal of the Bush administration's National Nanotechnology Initiative, which is a multi-agency umbrella program to build, characterize, and understand nanoscale devices. The National Nanotechnology Institute lists medicine, manufacturing, material science, information technology, energy, and environmental sciences as the targeted beneficiaries. The program is slated to spend nearly $1 billion in fiscal year 2005, up from $464 million in 2001, and the National Science Foundation gets $305 million, reflecting its broad mission across scientific disciplines. Sorry, guys. My new glasses came in, by the way, so I'm going to go pick those up this afternoon, so hopefully that will help my eyeballs when I'm reading these documents. Hey, but don't worry about it, because the National Science Foundation is not alone. The Department of Defense will spend $276 million. I'll guarantee you that that involves DARPA, as well as the Department of Energy, which we have found in the past. The Department of Energy was the one that was submitting the National Synthetic Biology Report to Congress back a few years ago. The Department of Energy will also get $211 million as well. Much of the Department of Energy budget funds 5 nanoscale science research centers, which are developing equipment and techniques available to researchers across nanotechnology disciplines. The National Institute of Health, which is the institute that stood up and said, hey, be careful, because some of these nanotechnologies react differently in the body, and we don't quite know what it's going to cause. The National Institute of Health, meanwhile, will spend $89 million on nanotechnology in 2005, including $30 million for the National Cancer Institute's new Alliance for Nanotechnology and Cancer, which is a 5-year program announced in September. We are talking about devices that can go into cells, repair DNA, deliver smart bomb drugs, or highlight a nascent malignancy, explains NCI Deputy Director Anna Baker, a PhD at the initiative's unveiling. Private industry is also rapidly investing in nanoscale science. Investment firms now list nanotechnology indices next to the Dow Jones Industrial Index and the NASDAQ. Dozens of investment reports have appeared, including Med Market Diligence Report, which in January profiled 90 nanomedicine companies, many of them academic spin-offs. Remember, we talked about how a lot of this mad science has proliferated. They've taken places such as the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, and DARPA. They've given them federal funding, and these institutes then have sprinkle-funded researchers utilizing our children at universities to become the unwitting participants in the future modification of all life on this planet. They have funded their research, and once they've made a discovery, they have helped spin them out as little IPOs and then commercialize the technology, a lot of times using them for military purposes to save our soldiers and to cure cancer. Another newsletter called Nanobiotech News recently listed 35 cancer drugs and diagnostics that are under development. Remember, this is 2004. This newsletter came out. So while the boundaries around nano are not completely discrete, monoclonal antibodies and other drugs developed with molecular level engineering are also sometimes included, and these are the first truly nanoscale medicines that are already in clinical trials. And I'm sure that is some of that shape-shifting immune system stuff called Abraxane and manufactured by the American Pharmaceutical Partners in Schulenburg, Illinois. The treatment is being tested in phase 3 trials for metastatic breast cancer. Each dose of Abraxane contains billions of nanoparticles coated with a plastic cell, which is Taxol, and by dropping Paxil directly into cancer cells, the formulation could potentially eliminate the use of toxic solvents that limit the dose and the effectiveness of the drug. We read about that on Wednesday. They were using some sort of organic solvent in the manufacture of those nanoparticles, and that was one of the things that the National Institute of Health raised some concern about. The idea with any nanoscale drug delivery is to land more drugs into the targets and less into the surrounding healthy tissue, kind of like the way chemotherapy does it. It affects all the cells, and that's why it is so dangerous. Abraxane accomplishes this by sneaking Paxil through the quote-unquote trap door in your blood vessels, and they said that the company chooses albumin as the core material for its nanomaterials because cells lining blood vessels are coated with albumin receptors. And as an abundant protein in blood plasma, albumin seeps through the channels in the epithelial cells to thin the blood and lower the blood pressure. Abraxane particles usurp this mechanism and slip through channels to a tumor cell below. And in March, they filed a fast-track Food and Drug Administration application, right, which is what the 21st Century Cures Act kind of moved forward, for Abraxane based on an ongoing 460-patient phase 3 trial. The company is hoping to get market approval later this year and is developing an oral and an inhaled version of the treatment, along with intravenous forms that are now in trials. Now, one of the things I want to point out here, besides the fast-tracking of this new treatment, is the fact that they're using a trap door, as they call it, or I call it a backdoor. It's kind of the same sort of thing that those lipid nanoparticles were doing. They were finding ways to trick the body to allow these things into the body to cross that blood barrier to get into circulation, to be able to target specific areas of the body. We looked at a few different ones that were targeting the brain, utilizing nanoparticles or RNAi for interference and flipping switches in neurons. And now they are going after tumors. We also saw, and there was a story, I think I even have this up, about the one that goes in and cuts off the blood supply to the tumors. It causes thrombin that then creates a blood clot that then cuts off the blood supply to the tumor. Guys, they are starting to learn all of the secrets about how the human body works, and don't think that that is always going to be for your benefit, because anytime they discover how to cure you, they also discover how to kill you. And not that I'm saying that these technologies are going to be used to kill anybody, but in the wrong hands, in the hands of rogue actors, whether they be from a foreign nation or maybe some underhanded division within your own government who wants to shut somebody up. Yeah, just saying, these things could be pretty useful. So although nanoparticles will reach the clinic first as a new way to deliver drugs, many experts expect similar technologies to quickly improve cancer imaging. Utilizing nanoprobes for diagnosis are going to have an immediate impact on medicine and oncology, and so is Dr. Watson. In fact, much of the initiative focuses on imaging. One of the first technologies to reach the clinic will be gold nanoparticles that can detect 10 to 20 molecules of a prostate-specific antigen, which is actually 10,000 times more sensitive than today's PSA test, which I think they do with blood. A single pinpoint of blood will reveal whether a patient needs further testing. And another technology called quantum dots. We've been researching quantum computing, because that's hopefully going to be our next story. And quantum dots have come up a few times. Also, I want to mention, and I need to do a little more research and talk to an engineering friend of mine about this, but I've come across a connection with a certain frequency, and that would be a frequency bandwidth that is included in one of the 5G spectrums that the FCC is looking to open up, that ties directly into creating qubits of phosphorus, which I didn't look it up, but I'm pretty certain that phosphorus your body utilizes in making bone and teeth. But in making a qubit of phosphorus, that same frequency that is being included in one of the 5G spectrums is also the frequency that flips a qubit of phosphorus from a 0 to a 1 and superposition, where it can maintain both states simultaneously. So I thought that was kind of a weird connecting point between 5G, quantum computing, and now they're talking about nanotechnology and quantum dots. So who knows, guys? And Bell Laboratories, don't forget that one. That was not expected, and I didn't see that when I first buzzed through this paper. So another technology called quantum dots presents a rainbow of potential. And though painstaking to produce, quantum dots are versatile and easy to use, making them attractive for rapid clinical uptake, says Barker. Just a few nanometers in diameter, the dots light up under inexpensive ultraviolet lamps, obliterating expensive scanners. Nano designers can attach a variety of molecules to the dots and antibodies to recognize telltale cancer proteins, for instance. Oh, so this is going to be in the detection mechanisms. They're going to use quantum dots, making them the Mr. Potato Head of medicine. You can put all kinds of different things like nose and eyes, lips. I never had a Mr. Potato Head, but my friend did. I always wanted to play with one. You could just stick on whatever you need, he says. And he rubs his hands together excitedly, at least in my mind's eye. In 2001, Nee's group at Emory University published an article in Nature Biotechnology describing these dots with a cadmium selenium core, which is kind of frightening since cadmium, if you've ever looked up cadmium poisoning, it is not very pleasant. A cadmium selenium core and a zinc sulfate shell. And then we also read, we were looking at some of the dangers of elements at a nanoscale that are toxic or maybe explosive nano-E, where they aren't at a macro scale. I think zinc was one of those metals that didn't do too well as far as stability in a nanoscale. Well, these dots possess a curious property seen only at the nanoscale. The color of light that they emit depends solely on their size, and dots with a diameter of 2 nanometers emit red, while 6 nanometer dots produce blue. Now, anyone who's been following Optogenetics would know that if they can get it to emit green, we got a game on here. They use different wavelengths of light to flip neuronal switches on and off. Now, we already found that they could do some of that encapsulating, I don't know, was that with CRISPR? Or that was with RNAi. But who's to say they couldn't put nano dots to reflect certain wavelengths of light and then create some sort of nano light meter or nano LED that they could have it work to interact. And I think we've been seeing a lot, at least I have, digging around in research about all kinds of new tunable electronics. And tunable means that they can just turn a dial like you could when you were looking for a radio frequency. Once they get tunable, nano-ized electronics that they might be able to control externally with some sort of frequency, like ultrasound. We've seen that quite a bit. Ultrasound, they've also discovered in trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, ultrasound opens the blood-brain barrier, allowing these technologies to cross over and get into the brain, especially with nano eye drops. That wouldn't be too hard. But after years of painstaking work, their team has improved the quantum dot design to an incredible degree. And instead of simply emitting one color of light, these fourth-generation dots emit an optical barcode. Oh! We've had Georgie Porgy Church working with IARPA, which is the DARPA of the intelligence agencies that happens to include the CIA, to barcode neurons. So this quantum dot emits an optical barcode, and I don't know if this has anything to do with them, but interesting that there was funding going into this, and this was already happening in 2004, and it was in the fourth generation already, that emits an optical barcode that includes various levels of red, green, and blue. Oh, look, they already did get green. So when we thought we were making a new discovery, but then we realized that televisions do the same thing. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. And not only TVs, but he also says computer monitors that display millions of colors, combining the red, green, and blue in a myriad of combinations. So out there to my co-author, I'll send you a link to this PDF that I am looking at. I think this is at the very end of the first line of page 2 and the very beginning of the second section. This is exactly what we had been looking at one point in time. There was a patent out there. We were digging into optogenetics for our optogenetics story that had looked at utilizing computer monitors and any type of CRT that could put out different colors for mind control and different frequencies. And we kind of thought that was strange as we were looking at the science behind optogenetics, being able to use flashes of light to flip switches in the brain and remote control a living organism. So I got to tell you guys that this actually, for being such an old story, this is connecting a lot of things together for me at least, and hopefully for you. The potential applications astound, including the ability to label thousands of genes with individual colors or tags. And George Church was also working on some sort of fluorescence tagging with neurons. So I don't know if this is the same technology or not, but it seems a little bit similar. Reading and interpreting the rainbows of colors would require new sophisticated software, but they point to gene microarrays as a model for such a data-intensive analysis. We'll be able to look at gene activation at the cellular level in real time, he says, and then put it in a dashboard and be able to monitor you. So when we are tracking tumors, physicians need quantitative information about protein levels and genes and tumor size. So you want to be able to say, look at my dashboard of Susie with her cancer. This tumor is now decreased by 50% instead of, quote, this big blob looks a little less gray like we currently do now. Wickline's team is working on nanoparticles that detect nascent capillaries that signal angiogenesis, and that would be the growth of the tumor as the blood supply increases and the tumor formation. But two of the challenges may hamper quantum dot utility, and that would be their inability to penetrate deep into the tissue and their perceived safety problems. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. But hey, even drugs have the ability to make you sick, and so we have to kind of weigh the threats versus how beneficial it is going to be for you. So even though it may be toxic, don't worry about it, Johnny. Make sure you eat this nano pill to get these nanoparticles into your circulatory system. But these two challenges may not hamper treatment. If the individual particles remain intact, they present no toxicity issues according to mouse data. But toxicologists are concerned that the weakly radioactive cadmium ions could break free and damage organs. And again, like I said, cadmium is pretty damn toxic. There were a lot of us who were working on some of the very first computers, putting them together because it was fun. And it was a new technology that nobody knew anything about. We used to use our bare hands while we were eating breakfast on a Sunday afternoon in our kitchens. And that then had all kinds of weird immune system issues after the fact. And I had done a couple shows way back in the beginning of Before the First Cup that had looked at some of that stuff. And I was pretty certain that I had maybe had some exposure to cadmium in the past, just by some strange issues that I've dealt with. And so anyway, to see toxicity, you have to dissolve the dots, and our data shows that this doesn't seem to happen in the liver or anywhere else. But I don't know if the FDA will buy that. Several groups are working on quantum dots made completely from non-toxic elements, but none have advanced as far as the cadmium dots. Such early nanodetection, and remember, we already read about that galodinium, that dye that they use for you when you get an MRI that already has all kinds of problems. They said it was going to flush completely out of the body within 24 hours, I think was the original thoughts, or at least within a month. But they found out, oh, no, it doesn't. It sticks around for a very long time, and not only in your organs, but also in your brain and in your eyeballs, which is concerning to me. Such early nanodetection coupled with nano delivery of drugs that concentrate cancer-killing power while limiting the toxicity could transform oncology. Everyone wants nanoscale imaging and atom-mold drug delivery, but it is not easy. The real test is enticing companies to spend the money that it takes to bring these things to market. And since then, it has been an orgy of mad science gone mad, nanotechnology in everything. and creating nutraceuticals to make you well again, as well as killing cancer to get you to step right up for that dangling carrot. All right, now this is a brand new one, March 14th, 2018, out of a publication called EgyptToday.com, and this is actually being published out of Egypt. Chemotherapy must be replaced with gold nanoparticles, says scientists. March 14th, 2018. Chemotherapy has disastrous side effects for cancer patients, as it does not only kill cancer cells, but it also damages healthy cells and can lead to death. According to Mostafa Al-Saeed, who is a professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology in the United States, and by his name, I could almost guess that he probably is from Egypt, hence why the story is being published in Egypt today. During the summit of nanotechnology at the British University in Cairo on Wednesday, Saeed said that tiny flecks of gold could be used in the fight against cancer as they interact easily with bodily tissues and completely kill the cancer. So don't worry about it. It's not cadmium anymore. It's just gold. Saeed further remarked that the treatment with gold-based nanoparticles is effective because gold as a nanoparticle reacts highly to light exposure. The temperature of the particle then increases and completely kills the cancer cells that cannot be transferred to another place in the body. He further explains that the research team had used rats for the first stage of their tests before treating pets, which includes cats and dogs, in their second stage of testing. Remember, we've mentioned that before, how a lot of these technologies we've been finding, they start with little lab rats, but then they do move on to pets. That's where the veterinary medicine comes into play here. And then typically stage 3 trials go to primates, and maybe they fast track it as a medical treatment into humans as a clinical trial. He further explains that the research team has been using animal testing for cancer treatment, and they found that the gold has no side effects or poisonous effects in the first stage based on blood samples of the test animals. However, Saeed added that the effects of the gold treatment on humans have not been shown yet, and many efforts have been achieved to raise awareness among Egyptians about cancer symptoms, including breast cancer, and how to treat the many types. The board of directors at Asut University approved the establishment of a new hospital of oncology, and they are due to increase the number of cancer patients. Cancer is the cause of 1 in 6 deaths around the world. However, it is no longer a death sentence with prevention, timely diagnosis, and some new mad science treatment that we are going to offer you. We have in our hip pocket now. Governments around the globe are helping to fight cancer by placing higher taxes on tobacco and alcohol while campaigning the public to take on healthier diets and lifestyles for the good of all, because you're going to cost the medical establishment too much money if you do what you want to do. And an estimated 30 to 50% of cancers can be prevented if these are followed, according to the World Health Organization, which is fueling a lot of this technology. Now here's another news story. This one just came out last week, and I think we read some of this the other day. March 15th, this was yesterday, 2018, out of a publication called Healthline.com. Scientists developing nanorobots whose mission is to kill cancerous tumors. Remember, if anybody's listened to the show for a long time, you guys know that when we first started talking about nanotechnology, I had postulated way back then that the only way that they were going to try to convince the general public to step right up and get the stuff injected into their bodies would be to offer them a cure for the big C. And it is everywhere right now. So this is this company out of Israel that we talked about, I don't know, it was either Wednesday or last Friday. Nanomedicine researchers have successfully programmed nanorobots. These aren't just nanoparticles. These are some sort of, I think these might be even the DNA origami nanorobots. They have programmed nanorobots to find tumors and cut off their blood supply while leaving your healthy tissue unharmed. They are microscopic, autonomous, and on a mission. These nanobots are programmed to seek and destroy tumors, and it is not science fiction. Scientists from Arizona State University, and remember, we found them in a couple different stories doing some of this nanotechnology research, with researchers from the National Center for Nanoscience and Technology of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, have successfully programmed nanobots to shrink tumors in mice. Radiation and chemotherapy are common cancer treatments, and they are often quite effective in destroying cancer cells, though the Egyptian publication says that it causes death. But hey, who are you going to believe? And they can also cause serious damage to healthy tissues with long-term consequences, including damage to your brain. You get something called chemobrain that gives you real problems trying to remember and think. And in this first-of-a-kind study in mammals, these researchers have now developed a way to attack cancerous tumors while preserving healthy tissue. They program these nanorobots to find tumors and cut off their blood supply, and they publish the details in Nature Biotechnology. The researchers in this study used a mouse tumor model. Human breast, melanoma, ovarian, and lung cancer cells were injected into the little mousies to spur tumor growth. But once the tumors grew, these nanobots were then injected into the mice. The nanorobots are made from flat, rectangular DNA origami sheets, 90 nanometers by 60 nanometers, and they were outfitted by an enzyme called thrombin, which helps blood to clot. Nanorobots. I think when we read this story, I had warned you about thrombin production in eating spinach and broccoli, and I looked a little more into that, and it is actually a vitamin that is in the spinach and broccoli, and I think it is vitamin K, maybe even Brussels sprouts. And vitamin K causes your body to produce thrombin, so that's where that connection comes in. But not that Brussels sprouts, spinach, and broccoli are bad, because I do eat quite a few of those, though I should be careful because of my stroke. I don't want to have any blood clots. The nanorobots traveled through the bloodstream carrying a DNA aptamer, and the DNA aptamer targeted the protein called nucleolin, and high amounts of which are found only on the surface of the tumor's endothelial cells. That would be the cells that are growing blood vessels. This particular protein is not found on the surface of any healthy cells. So actually, that sounds like it is a pretty good target. And after locating and binding to the tumor blood vessel surfaces, the nanorobots opened up and delivered the thrombin. And the thrombin caused clotting in the blood vessels that fed the tumor growth, cutting off the blood supply and killing the tumor tissue. Now that is called apoptosis, kind of. Apoptosis, well, a little bit different because this is forming blood clots in the blood vessels, but then it kills the blood vessels. Apoptosis is killing the blood vessel and cutting off the blood supply, and that is something that high levels of curcumin can do. And I just saw a story just before I came on air today, but I didn't pull it up, about them putting, I think it was curcumin, onto or into nanoparticles to deliver that to tumor cells, and I might be a little more apt for something like that rather than something that targets blood vessels and causes them to clot, because who's to say, that things wouldn't go awry or something would go a little loopy once these things were inside of you. And it happened very quickly. They said within a few hours of injection, the nanorobots had gathered in very large numbers around the tumors, kind of like the legions of nanobots that we read about a long time ago. And within 24 hours, the tumor blood supply was blocked and the tissue damage had begun. Healthy tissues were not affected, they say, and there was no evidence of the nanorobots entering the brain, where they might cause serious side effects, such as a massive stroke, like I said initially reading this story. And the researchers found that the nanorobots are safe and effective in shrinking tumors in both mice and Bama miniature pigs. And most of the nanorobots were cleared from the body after 24 hours, just like they had said about that gadolinium originally. And in the mouse model, median survival time doubled from 20 days to 45. Dr. Santosh Kasiri is a neuro-oncologist and a neurologist and the chair of the Department of Translational Neuroscience and Neurotherapeutics at the John Wayne Cancer Institute at Providence St. John's Health Center in California. He told Healthline that there are currently many drugs that go to the tumor within a few hours of administration, but tumor shrinkage can usually take a long time. This approach seemed a little faster than normal because it is not attacking the tumor cell. It is attacking by cutting off the blood supply and causing acute symptoms similar to a stroke, ding ding, in the tumor. And the blood clots happen fast, and we do see similar effects with other adenogenesis drugs like Avastin that have pretty quick effect relative to chemo for solid tumors. In addition to targeting tumors, cancer treatment often requires a systemic approach. That is because cancer cells can break off the primary tumor and travel through the blood and the lymphatic systems. According to Carisi, the treatment used in the study will only work in the context of a tumor blood vessels, and it won't target single cells because a group of tumor cells come together and start making new blood vessels, but only then can the drug be delivered to those sites. But in this study, the nanorobots did help prevent metastases in the mice, and that would be the cells breaking off and going to other locations in the body. And in an interview with Healthline, Dr. Jack Jacob, a medical oncologist and medical director of Memorial Care Institute at Orange Coast Medical Center in California, also helped put this research into perspective. This mechanism, he says, targets blood vessel formation, so highly vascular tumors will be sensitive to this treatment. There are other agents now in use in multiple cancers to target blood vessel formation, but cutting off the blood supply may also have effect on circulating tumor cells that are spreading in the body, he said. But that may not be enough. So cancer cells set up a location to grow, but they need nutrients to allow them to join with other cancer cells to create a tumor, and that would be sugar. That's what I'm going to say from what I've found in my research. In theory, it would affect them and the circulating tumor cells, but it is unlikely to be clinically meaningful. They might already have escaped the impact of this application. And he said that we would still need additional drug therapies, even if you get the nanobots. So this is going to be one big scientific experiment. You might need to reduce the size of the tumor before surgery, and limiting the blood supply of the tumor would cause them to necrose or die, and that would be necrosis without an adequate nutrient supply of blood. This seems safe, he says, because it doesn't cause the normal toxicity of chemotherapy and radiation. So I can imagine the next step would be to see how it works with chemotherapy and radiation together. Sure, why not? Let's use nanoparticles with radiation and chemo, even though we know radiation and chemo kills more than it cures. All right, so I want to go a little further here. So we have talked about nanoparticles for 5 or 7 different shows and how they are going to be used not only in healthcare and medicine, but also in the creation of different nutraceuticals and textures in food to make foods healthy, because we need to cure everyone of their 21st century lifestyle of eating junk food and sitting on a couch and watching the TV that is flipping switches in your brain. We are also drinking things that we do not know about. There was a story a couple days ago. Somebody actually even commented on it in the notes of the show on YouTube about nanoparticles from manufacturing, especially getting into our environment. There was a story that had said that they were everywhere. They were in the ground, they were in the air, they were in our water. Well, to put a little connecting point to things that we are ingesting that we didn't know about, this might not even be nanotechnology, but it could. But this is something else. This is out of BBC yesterday, March 15th, 2018. Plastic particles found in bottled water. Oh, yes. So in your drinking water, and I want to thank, I don't remember his name, HDev, who sent me the U.S. map on all the different water systems and whether or not they found toxic chemicals in the municipal drinking water systems. Well, just like that, it's not just the water that's coming through your municipal water systems with lead, and I don't remember the name of that chemical, hexane, one of those hexanes or something that Aaron Brockovich had discovered. But also in your bottled water, there's been question as to where that bottled water is coming from. There are no real regulations as to how that water needs to be processed. And there was even a publication a while back that had talked about one of the bottled waters coming right from the Albany, New York, municipal water system, meaning that someone just took a plastic bottle and opened a tap. So, story out of the BBC from yesterday, plastic particles found in bottled water. Tests on major brands of bottled water had found that nearly all of them contained tiny particles of plastic. Now, we know our oceans have plastic islands floating in them. And plastic kind of came from back when this whole instant gratification, disposable society started that I blame all on Bernays. Edward Bernays teaching us that we need to have more than the Joneses and gave us that dangling carrot to chase for. In the largest investigation of its kind, 250 bottles bought in 9 different countries were examined. Research led by journalism organization Orb Media discovered that an average of 10 plastic particles per liter, each larger than the width of a human hair, in the drinking water in the bottles. Companies whose brands were tested told the BBC that their bottling plants were operating at the highest standards, and the tests were conducted at the State University of New York in Fredonia. I know exactly where that is. That is in the southern tier of Buffalo, New York. It's another SUNY school. I thought that was pretty awesome. Sherry Mason, a professor of chemistry at the university, conducted the analysis and talked to the BBC. She said, quote, "We found plastic in bottle after bottle and brand after brand." It is not about pointing fingers at particular brands, she says, and it is really showing that this is everywhere, that plastic has become such a pervasive material in our society, and it is pervading our water and all of these products we consume at a very basic level. The reason why I'm covering this story is because they also let the nanotech genie out of the bottle. The plastic genie has been out of the bottle for a very long time. And so has the glyphosate genie, and they are finding glyphosate in rainwater and in breast milk. So, guys, we are being contaminated at every single level of biology. Currently, there is no evidence yet that ingesting very small pieces of plastic called microplastics can cause harm, but understanding the potential implications is an active area of science. And, you know, they're finding them in fish. They're finding all of those micro beads that they're putting into all kinds of consumer products in the water system as well. Commenting on these results, Professor Mason said, quote, "It is not catastrophic, the numbers that we are seeing, but it is concerning. Experts have told the BBC that people in developing countries where tap water may be polluted should continue to drink water from plastic bottles," but they didn't say anything about developed countries. And contacted to comment on their findings, the companies behind the brands have insisted that their products meet the highest standards for quality and safety. They also point out the absence of any regulations on microplastics and the lack of standardized methods to test for them. Last year, Professor Mason found plastic particles in samples of tap water. What? And other researchers have also spotted them in seafood, beer, sea salt, and even the air you breathe. And the largest work comes from amid growing international attention on plastic, fueled by the BBC's acclaimed Blue Planet 2 series, in which Sir David Attenborough highlighted the threat of plastic waste in our oceans. The research into bottled water involves buying packs from 11 different global and national brands in countries chosen for their large populations or their relatively high consumption of bottled water. They were leading international brands Aquafina, Danzi, Evian, Nestle Pure Life, and San Pellegrino. And the leading national brands included Aqua, which is from Indonesia, Bizzarri in India, Apura in Mexico, Gerolsteiner in Germany, Minabala in Brazil, and Wahaha in China. To eliminate any risk of contamination, purchases in shops and deliveries to courier companies were recorded on video, and some packs were ordered in the United States over the internet. And the screening for plastic involved adding a dye called Nile Red to each bottle for a technique that was developed by British scientists for rapid detection of plastics in seawater. Well, now I'm going to jump ahead because I never got to nanotech in food packaging, but the reason why I wanted to cover that plastic particle found in bottled water is because even in just simple bottled water, the packaging is migrating somehow into the product. So who's to believe that nanotechnology in food packaging wouldn't necessarily do some of the same? This is out of slideshare.net, where there's a lot of PowerPoint presentations that are made public, titled Seminar on Applications of Nanotechnology in Food Packaging and Food Safety. And they are being used for creating barrier materials, antimicrobials, and food sensors. All right, let's move ahead a couple slides. Introduction, packaging, scientific method of enclosing food, materials, or goods in a container, and it ensures the delivery of goods to the ultimate consumer in the best possible condition intended for their use. And then we have definitions of nanoscience, nanomaterials, and we don't really need to do that because we've done days and days on nano everything. All right, so nano foods being used in agriculture, processing, packaging, and nutrition. In agriculture, they are using them as new pesticides, and we read about those a few days ago, these new nanopesticides, as well as for targeted genetic engineering, identity preservation, agrochemical delivery, and then sensors to monitor soil conditions. In the processing, they are being used as nano-encapsulized flavors and aromas, and we looked at those on Wednesday, as well as the gelatinization and viscifying agents, and those would be those nano-emulsions. And the next one is nano-emulsion, so I guess that's something different, as well as anti-caking, and that would be those anti-caking agents that they put into different powder forms, and the sanitation of equipment. They are also using nanomaterials in packaging for UV protection, antimicrobial purposes, conditions and abuse monitors, high barrier plastics, security and anti-counterfeiting, as well as contaminant sensors. And we read about that one that could sense E. coli. And then very last but not least would be in nutrition, and that would be for nutraceuticals, nutrient delivery, mineral and vitamin fortification, now with vitamin A, as well as drinking water purification, and there'll be some of those nanocarbon tubules and the sensory characteristics of supplements. And I don't know what that means, or maybe that would be in smart pills. So for materials, we have nanoparticles, nanoemulsions, nanocomposites, as well as nanostructured materials. And then they are going to, I just heard a dink-a-link. I don't know what that was. And we are going to add nanosensors to our food. The most attractive area for food nanoscience research and development is packaging. and they are showing a package of meat wrapped in plastic and a label on it, as well as these little brown, I don't know, the things that mushrooms come in, those little trays, except they're brown instead of blue from polystyrene. Application of nanomaterials in packaging. We could do polymer and nanocomposites, nanocoatings, surface biocides, active packaging, intelligent packaging, as well as bioplastics. And we can incorporate nanomaterials into packaging polymers to improve their physical performance, durability, barrier properties, and their biodegradabilities. Maybe that's why they're putting it into those. So from here, we can make things stronger. We could block oxygen. We could tell whether or not you have some sort of pathogen. And the first successful example of a polymer clay nanocomposite was developed by the Toyota Corporation in 1986. Toyota's come up a few times in some of this mad science research. They put $1 billion into their AI institute that then they put Gil Pratt, who is the former director of DARPA's Grand Robotics Challenge, in charge of it. But then there's also nano coatings, incorporating nanomaterials into packaging surfaces, either on the inside, the outside, or sandwiched in a laminate, improves the barrier properties using nano-thin coatings. We also read that Kodak was into some of this. Can help provide enhanced barrier performance, vacuum-deposited aluminum coatings on plastic films, as well as coatings on surfaces of glass food beverage containers, bottles, and jars with organosilanes. Organosilanes. Well, that's pretty scary. There's also multi-layer PET bottles, and that is a kind of plastic, and sheets for improved barrier properties. And they also put PET into vitamins and liquid emulsions of vitamins. I've seen that as well. Nylon nanocomposites for films and paper coatings designed for medium barrier applications, as well as a Honeywell polymerized nanocomposite for bottles incorporating active O2 scavengers and passive nanocomposite clay particles. That was also the stuff that Kodak was working something on. Food packaging, such as processed meat for beef jerky, rare meat, sausage, ham, etc., and fresh foods like raw fish, sushi, dried fish, processed milk products like cheese, soft cakes, sandwich cakes, candies, and anything with high fat.